We are live. Hey, what's going on out there, social media land? This is Kareem. We're going to be starting another conversation. United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. As you see, we got the main man, Mark Bassett. He is waiting to get going. Mark, why don't you say what's up to the audience out there? Mark is so casual and laid back. I absolutely love it.
I love it. Hello, everybody. I'm in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is basically a part of Boston. So, hello from the great Northeast. Pleasure to
The
be here
great
tonight.
Northeast. So we're gonna get started. We want you guys to come in, like, tag, and share this conversation with those that you know and love. I'm just checking to make sure that we are public on all of our sites. And I think we're good. We're gonna get going. We're gonna get started. Today we're gonna be talking about politics, faith, and relationships. And it's kind of interesting. The perspective I think that we're gonna take these things from. We've kind of had some conversations on our own about these, and I think it'll be great to just kind of generate some conversation and thought processes together as a group. So stick and stay. We're coming back right quick, right, really quick.
Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on 100.5 and 790 News Radio WSGW and online at WSGW.com. Here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. Today, we will be talking about politics, faith, and relationships. If you're looking in the social media stream, or if not, we have with us my co-host, Mark Bassett. Mark, give a shout out to the people.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Well, I'm not seeing you. Good to be with you tonight.
Mark is also, once again, he's on a quest to visit the children.
Yeah.
This quest is taking him to the great Northeast. We're exactly Boston.
Boston. Yeah. I'm in Cambridge looking at the Charles River. Walked by Fenway Park today, and we're going to be over by the Garden tonight. So
retirement is treating him too well. Go back to work, Mark. And we also have with us my producer, Chandler P, in the place to be. Chandler, what's going on?
Not much. Feeling a little under the weather today, but pulling through.
All right, he's under the weather. He's mummified. He's got his mask on. He's got his lime green headphones on. He is a sight to see. What is that?
We don't have a camera for him yet.
We still don't have him on camera. He is the one that you want to see if you're watching.
That might be on purpose.
That's funny. That's funny. But we're gonna have a great conversation today. We're gonna be talking about politics, faith, and relationships. So we want you guys to like, tag, and share this conversation with your friends. It's gonna be interesting because we're gonna share our thoughts and perspectives on this. We're gonna talk a little bit about this because I think that race is a very interesting piece. And whenever you inject it or you look at it in those perspectives or in the framework of how people see it, it's very interesting because also we know that there's very different. I shared with you guys a while ago that Mark came to the Potter's Church, which is my church. We consider ourselves a Pentecostal church. It's a non what do you call it?
Non-denominational.
Yeah, I struggled for a second. Non-denominational Pentecostal ministry, which means we believe in the spiritual gifts as released on the day of Pentecost in the book of Acts. So it's interesting, but he came in and he and his wife were there, and Mark was taking it all in, and he's like, okay, I saw him nod his head, and afterwards we had some cornbread, macaroni and cheese, some collard greens. Yeah, and then he's asked if he was invited to the cookout, but so I think it'll be an interesting conversation. We had we didn't really get a chance to talk about it then. We're going to talk about it now. But let's start our show as we always do, talking about what is hot off the press. And so let's do that right now. Chandler, I there's a couple of things that are interesting. First of all, Mark, you traveled. No masks anymore, huh?
Thank God. I was ecstatic.
You were ecstatic?
Yeah, when we were in DC, we flew up here from DC. When we flew from from Michigan to DC on Thursday last week, in a mask, all masked up like usual. And then when we flew to Boston on Tuesday morning, no masks. We brought them along. It's kind of like, but we didn't have to wear them. So and a lot of people are wearing them. So
they were showing images of people picking, throwing them away. Like, yes, they're gone. Oh man, but so I guess the thing is this: I think we're at a point where if you want to wear a mask, and this is what I tell people, wear your mask. But I'm never a proponent of making people do things. I think that it made sense, if people are going to be traveling, because there's a lot of people who get sick and they don't care who they infect. So I think that during the height of this pandemic, when we were still trying to figure out what was going on, it made a lot of sense. But now I think that common sense has to play a part in what's going on and what we're doing. So, Mark, you enjoy breathing all of that fresh air coming?
Honestly, I've been doing a lot of traveling this year. And, you from the moment you walk into an airport, you have a mask on until you leave. And you might have a mask on for 12 hours, because I've been traveling to the West a lot. And I swear to God,
it's 5 hours right there. Yeah.
I felt, like I was sick every time before a day. Like I had a cold, I had issues. And so, I'm glad not to be wearing a mask anymore. To me, it was, again, a little bit about common sense. If I can go to a concert at Little Caesars Arena with 30,000 other people, and not have to wear a mask, I'm not sure why I need to wear a mask on an airplane. So,
Mark, it's so funny that you say that. There's a concert that's coming up at Little Caesars Arena, and my friends were like, "Hey, let's go and let's go to the concert." I was like, "Yeah," I was amped. I was like, "Let's do this." And then I started seeing how sold out it was and the seats that we were gonna have. And they're like, "Let's get in row 1, right in front of the stage."
Who are you gonna go see?
My anxiety kicked in, and I was like, I can't do this. So now they're talking about getting suites, which means that we're going to be paying a good $700 a ticket. But
it's a good act.
My mental health is much better. It's called, I think it's like the Kingdom Tour or something. Kirk Franklin and
are these gospel singers or something? Or
it's Kirk Franklin is a gospel singer, but then there's I think Elevation Worship or some members from Elevation Worship are there, so it's kind of like a Christian gospel thing.
Yep.
But it is
wow, $700 tickets to Christian gospel music. That's quite the.
That's because we're going to be locked in a suite, Mark. But I couldn't do it any other way. My anxiety started kicking in. I'm so free, in small groups, and but when it gets to be that many people, I just get a little crazy. So I decided that we got to make amends. I think that if I'm traveling, Mark, I've always been a person, even when there was no mandate, I was like, we're sitting in this airplane in this 10 tube of toothpaste, this 10 can for 4.5, 5 hours, and this air is being circulated. I wonder how fresh it is. This is before.
It is, but it's, they've got filters. It's all filtered and everything. And so
I guess it's no different than if you go out to a restaurant, you sit with friends, you eat for hours. You're
sitting in the radio station. It's the same deal. So
yeah, that's why I'm glad Chandler over there looks like the Mummy Returns over there in the corner. If you guys can see him.
I have some opinions about all that, because I got COVID in September, and the only thing I did was go out to a restaurant for the first time, and then immediately got sick. And then this last weekend I went to the mall, and I followed the crowd. I didn't wear a mask, and now I'm feeling like bleh.
Well, yeah. So
by the way, there's something called statistics, Chandler, and that doesn't necessarily prove that those cause the COVID.
I need to do it one more time, and then I'll have my rule of threes.
Bumper your rule, you got it locked in. But I will tell you this: when I was in a restaurant, and this is after that, I don't know, it was the first wave, 4th wave, 15th wave. One of the waves, I was at a restaurant, and I watched a server go from one table and drop off their drinks. Then she went to one table, picked up their drinks, took the glasses back to the bar, then picked up the new drinks, took them to the other table, then came to my table and wanted to take my order. And I was like, oh, this is how we're getting it. It's the waitresses, it's the servers. That's what's happening. So I gave up that. I said, I'm good for a minute. But anyway, so I'm glad. America, we're spoiled. We want our freedoms the way we want our freedoms, and we want our freedoms now. So I'm glad that that's over, Mark. You can continue to fly. But I think that if I got on a plane, I've been trying to cut down all of my movement in the air for quite a while, but I'm gonna venture back out, Mark. I'm feeling brave enough to make that venture. So I'm gonna wear a mask probably into the main corridors.
That's okay. To each their own. I mean, at this point, to me, I agree with you early on. I thought it was,
Yeah.
important that everyone wear a mask. At this point, life has to march on. And, to me, it's like, if you want to wear a mask, that's cool. But I don't really want to. I understand the risks I'm taking. Again, I'm a scientist at heart. I think the statistics are really pretty clear for someone like my age, my health profile. The risk of me dying from this thing is really low. And so I'd rather not wear a mask.
Mark,
So.
you said that like you were a young spring chicken. My risk, my age, my viral profile.
It is. I mean, I am in terms of like the mortality rate. 65 or 70 is when it starts to get a little more dicey. I'm 61.
Yeah.
And I'm healthy. I don't have any pre-existing conditions, so.
And I laugh about it because the reality of the situation is that they told me, I want to get through this because there's something I want to talk about, but the doctors told me, Kareem, do not take another COVID test because I
refuse anymore. What I don't know. Yes.
Well, I had been fully vaccinated, and then I got the booster, and then I got COVID, and then I came back, and I was exposed a couple weeks later, and I went in, so they couldn't do the regular test, so they had to take my blood. They're like, dude, your immunity is through the roof. Don't come back here.
Yeah.
They're like, don't waste our time. And I think there's probably a few of us out there that they feel that way about. But anyway, so Celine Dion, oh my God. Mark, did you have a chance to see the video that I sent you?
I did. It was, I did.
It is the kookiest thing. And, she's always been somewhat mysterious, but this video is Celine Nunu. She's with a group called Nunu or something. And I think that they did children's clothing, and she's partnered with this group to come up with a new clothing line. And this clothing line, Celine Nunu, I think is what it's called. Produced this commercial, and Chandler, did you get a chance to see that commercial?
I did not.
Oh man, you got to take a look. So this commercial, I'll just give you the essence of this commercial, Mark, and I'm glad that you've had an opportunity to see it. In this commercial, she's running through what appears to be a hospital, and she continually says, "I'm Celine Dion. I'm Celine Dion." Her celebrity status is going to get her through, and it does. And so she's goes in and she covertly goes into this birthing ward or this child ward.
It's the maternity ward.
Maternity ward.
Room that has all the babies.
And she sprinkles this black.
For the crowd, it's like they're all in blue on one row and all in pink.
And pink in the other. Thank you.
Other row. Yeah.
So gender specific, the babies are in blue, the boys are in blue, the girls are in pink, is what I'm assuming is the case.
Yep.
She sprinkles this fairy dust. He sprays this fairy dust, blows it on them. Then all of a sudden, everything kind of turns black. I don't know if you noticed the little animals or things or whatever they were.
No, I didn't notice that. They were all then wearing the same clothes, they're black and white. Basically.
All of their clothes, right. So all of the pink, the gender specific colors were all gone, and there were eyes that were blinking. Mark, you got to go back and watch the video.
I'll watch it. Yeah, okay.
Like, are these aliens or something that are in here?
No.
And it just, black crosses, and they're showing the babies in these black and white, no specific gender kind of clothes. And the idea is that she's creating clothing that is gender neutral. And so, I had to go back and watch one of the interviews concerning. She says, "Hey, and one of the babies had a shirt, a onesie that said New Order on it."
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So one of the onesies said New Order. And so in the conversation, I'm thinking, okay, there's going to be an explanation here that makes sense, And she says, no, we want to create a new world order where, we are not forcing children into genders and they're able to choose. So we give them a blank slate and they choose what their gender would be when they feel comfortable older. And we confine them to these genders by giving pink and blue. And what if they don't feel comfortable when we stifle them? Mark, it was the craziest commercial I've ever. Yeah. What was your thought when you saw that commercial?
Again, I think it's, this whole thing around gender identity and being more open to kind of gender fluidity. To me, it was just latching on to a hot topic right now. To me, it was all about trying to create, just reinforce her brand as this wacky celebrity. A bit. There's another whole topic around why are we so focused on this for kids so young and everything, which is an interesting topic because I'm an older guy, and why we're talking to like 4 and 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds about gender roles and are you gay or you're not gay? I don't know why.
What's the purpose of this, Mark? I mean, it's okay now. And I'll tell you, DeSantis down in Florida, I think sometimes he does things that are a bit quacky and wacky and just kind of, a little different. But this particular topic, they're slamming him for, and this is funny because they're slamming him for what do they call it? The don't say gay law, the don't say gay law.
Yeah.
But my thought is, why are we having this conversation about adolescent children? I mean, shouldn't parents have the right to determine when it's the right time for my children to have these conversations?
Yep. I tend to agree. And again, biologically there are men and women, and I get that there are some that feel psychologically they're more one versus the other. And I had an old boss that used to say, is like, I can't make a rule that makes everybody happy. And so I have to make rules that kind of satisfy the vast majority of people. And at times I think we're trying to, meet the needs of a pretty small minority and kind of, in essence, at the expense of everybody else. And again, I don't, I just don't know why we're having this kind of discussion about kids, basically with kids at that early of an age.
I was blown away, but that particular, I think it's crazy. First of all, I think that parents have to kind of stand up. I do believe parents are the first line of defense for their children, and they should be the ones that determine, those core values. And we can't turn.
Well, that was interesting because part of her commercial was, in essence, like, your kids aren't yours.
I know you think that your kids are. Then she gets wrestled down and gets arrested, and she says, "I'm Celine Dion." That was the concept. Your kids aren't yours. We think that they're ours, but they belong to the world, to the universe. But anyways, I tell you guys, you got to check out that. It is the craziest commercial. And, I just kind of think that we're at a place right now where, and Mark, you're a man of faith as well, where anything that relates to faith, anything that relates to any semblance of a tradition, and I understand a lot of our traditions are, soaking in, misogyny and all of these other things. But the fact of the matter is, everything that is traditional is not bad. And I think that we've got to begin to understand there's certain traditions that we have that are worth having. The idea that a man and a woman would have a family, I think, and raise their children appropriately. That's a tough conversation. I mean, but hey, I tell people to do whatever you decide to do. You do it what you feel comfortable. I have my personal beliefs. I don't want to push my beliefs on you, but at the same time, there has to be a stopping part, don't you think, Mark, where we have to stop allowing these world visions to push into our living rooms, into our front doors.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, that's a whole nother show. I think, my belief, you're basically talking about, like, I've kind of evolved in my belief around sexuality. Ultimately, I think most people who are gay are born that way, because the logic to me is like, especially if you think 20 years ago plus. Why would anyone choose to be persecuted like a homosexual is persecuted?
Mark, listen to Mark sounding like the liberal, and here I am. Over here.
I believe
we have changed roles, okay?
But for sure, I don't think the government should be getting involved into, like, who am I sleeping with or not. Now, that being said, irrespective of all that, I do believe, parents, it's their obligation and right to raise their children in the manner they see fit, and the government shouldn't get too involved in that unless there's abuse and things like that going on. So
now that becomes a big issue, because we are dealing with times where we want more government intervention in terms of how, even down to the things like how we raise our families and the beliefs.
There's one state, I forget which state it is, that just outlawed spanking. You can't spank your kid. Yeah,
man,
corporal punishment is not the preferred method, and but to be honest, I spanked my kids once or twice growing up, and frankly, I was spanked, and
I don't know what spankings are, Mark. We didn't get spankings when we was growing up. We got whoopings. That's what we call it. We got whoopings. And I'm sure it was illegal at that time. Jenny DeMore, I'm sure you know what you're talking. She said that the government needs to step back. I'm sure you understand what I mean. Because I know what happened to us as kids. It had to be borderline child abuse. We used to get whipped so bad that it was just a tough situation. So yeah, so these kids now, they can't take anything.
Jenny, I did too. We had sister married child beater is what we used to call her. But
sister married child beater.
Yeah, she would get into fights she would challenge kids to fights. You want to fight me? Don't? Yes.
So this is interesting, but I want to get through some of these other things. I want to kind of make sure that our audience is aware. This coming year, last year, President Joe Biden, he enacted and signed into law that Juneteenth, which is June 19th, is in fact a national holiday. So we're now celebrating this. And most people are like, what in the world is Juneteenth? We've talked about it before, but it is, in fact, when all African slaves were free. The emancipation that was written was withheld from a number of the crop workers because they wanted to get in that fall harvest. And it just hadn't trickled. There was still, a war going on. The Confederates were still doing what they were doing in the South. And it was finally in Galveston, Texas, when the proclamation was finally read 2.5 years after it had been signed. And so it was interesting. No corporal punishment. Now, this is funny. This is one of these these young new age guys out there that are making things happen, doing things. He says no corporal punishment. And I don't think that we should beat our children. I think that there has to be some conversation. But I am a word person. So I believe you spare the rod, you spoil the child. It don't mean the rod, you beat a kid with. It's a rod of correction, and correction comes in various forms. So that's interesting to hear you young people, Jeffrey Bulls, who's fresh, still got milk behind his ears, as my grandparents used to say no corporal punishment. But and so anyways, we're gonna have this celebration this year, June 19th. Morley Plaza, Renee Morris, who's one of she is the coordinator for this event. And it's going to be kind of cool, Mark, for us to see what's taking place. There will be an actual reading of the edict, the portion of the Emancipation Proclamation that freed the slaves. There will be some proclamations that are made, some singing, some music, some dancing, and it should be a good time to come and hang out downtown in Morley Plaza. We'll give you guys more information as it comes forward. But we definitely want to make sure that we're celebrating that. I can't wait to celebrate it in the manner that, the way that we desire for it to be celebrated, remembering that historical piece. And then also, then we celebrate our nation's history.
Do you guys want to do United Shades of Gray out there?
Hey,
that's a great idea.
That'd be cool.
That would be.
We had Chandler around for some reason.
Hey, he can't get anything else right. He can come up with a bright idea. But no, we appreciate. That's a great idea, Chandler. That would be really cool. Also, just so for those who are out there, we had the Dow Treasure Academy. I told you guys about the initiatives that I've been working with. There's a variety of them that I've been working with community schools. That particular initiative started a partnership with SVSU this weekend, and I was so amped about it. I did not know. Mark, had you had an opportunity to go out to the Carmona College of Business at all?
I've been there once or twice for some different things. Yeah, it's a beautiful facility.
Really wow. Yep. Wow. So those kids, I took the group of kids out there this weekend, and Professor Muhammad Adel, he took the kids through and he began to just kind of educate them on the Bloomberg platform, for trading. They did 3 different innovations. It was just really cool to see these kids, and they were like, what in the world is this? Learning blockchain technology and talking about NFTs, and they're doing some cryptocurrency engagement and other things. Then we did a solar energy, geothermal energy, wind energy, and it was just a number of things that were out there. I thought it was one of the most amazing experiences. It was funny because we had some mentors that graduated from SVSU from the College of Business, and they were like, wait a minute, can we come back and learn this stuff? Because none of this stuff was here when we were here. But it was really a cool opportunity. So I want to say shout out to we got Frank chiming in. He's on baby watch. Frank, keep us awake. That young man, he's getting ready to have child number 2. His wife is at the hospital. It was an awesome experience. We saw their faces light up. It truly was. And so I'm excited about what they have to offer and the opportunities for growth. And one of the things that is most important to me is that we give access and inclusion in these opportunities. Mark, you've been a great proponent of that. Chandler, you have been a great outcry and have kind of stood up for those issues as well. We're going to get into this conversation talking about politics, faith, and relationships when we come back with more United Shades of Gray. I almost said United Shades, but United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. Those of you who are listening to us on the radio, thank you for tuning in and listening to this conversation. Those of you who are on social media, like, tag, and get your friends involved with this conversation. Great to see you guys building this audience out. We'll be right back with more conversation right after this commercial break. Thank you, guys.
United Shades of Gray will continue on WSGW.
All right, guys, we're going to get going in just a quick second. We're just going to take a quick break and get started with the second half of this. Great to see all of you that are in the stream. Let's build this conversation. Now, we're going to talk about race and faith and politics. And it's going to be interesting because I think, especially when we get to the conversation of race, there's something that I really want to ask. Have you guys ever heard the conversation or the coining of Christian religion as the white man's religion? Have you ever heard that before? Never heard about that. We'll talk about that because I kind of understand where it comes from.
My high school experience.
Because I would be interested in what you define as Christian. I mean, because Catholicism is the original Christianity, and Catholicism is filled with non-white people, and very socially minded, and so
it is an interesting conversation. So I'm interested in having that conversation. Whether you agree or disagree, we'll talk about that in a minute. So those of you out there, let's build this audience. I think it's going to be a provocative conversation as we talk about faith, politics, and relationships. Let's get into it.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
Hey, this is Kareem Bowen. We're back with more United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. Mark Bassett is bopping his head as he sits in our great American Northeast. Mark, what's going on out there in the Northeast?
It's looking great. It's been a beautiful day. It's been sunny, a little cool, but 50s or 60s. It's Red Sox are in town. The Celtics are in town for the playoffs. So,
and he's going out with his Ghostbuster goggles on. He's not going to either place. So, Mark,
neither place. I'm going on a ghost tour with my daughter and son.
Share with everybody what that is. What is that exactly, Mark?
I don't know. Boston's obviously a really old city. If you walk around, there's graveyards with headstones from the 1600s, and they basically take you around town and take you to different places where there's been, I'm assuming, sightings of ghosts and things like that, supposedly. So,
Mark, I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna say it like a brother that was watching a scary movie. That's some real white stuff right there, Mark. You're chasing ghosts, Ghostbusters. No, you're my guy. But I just, when you said that, I'm like, you're out chasing ghosts. All right, we're running from them. I'll tell you that
there was a black guy in Ghostbusters. Come on.
Yeah, they decided to put one in the character as a character.
He didn't get killed either in the first 5 minutes.
Not in the first 5 minutes. I think that is funny. You got it. You got it. But hey, let's get into this conversation today because I think it's going to probably provide a lot of laughs on today. But I want to talk a little bit about Frank is cracking up in the street. Funny. I want to talk a little bit about politics, faith, and relationships, and we're going to start with politics, Mark. And I'm going to ask this question, and you and Chandler, feel free to jump in. Chandler, why can't you have that camera?
What?
I'm going to buy Chandler a camera. I'm gonna
No,
buy a
it's
can.
okay.
Chandler, we want you on camera. We want that.
You-
I want them to see that mask and those lime green head. I want them to see what I'm seeing and have to keep a straight face while doing this.
Maybe
Okay,
next time.
It's
maybe
like
next.
the Andromeda strain. I
He
don't know if
looks
you
like
ever
a
seen.
walking. He kind of looks like a walking germ today, Mark. So maybe this isn't a good day to do that. Okay. But so we want to talk about what role does politics play in the unification of our nation across racial lines? Does it have a part to play in terms of how our nation should be unified? We've seen the divisive role that it's played and is playing currently, in terms of dividing the nation. Is there a role that politics must play in terms of unifying our nation?
I think it has to. I mean, to me, that's one of the fundamental roles of any kind of leaders of the government. Again, that's what's been so disheartening to me about politics in the last a while, frankly, and it's just gotten worse and worse about how divisive it is. And to me, the first job of a politician should be to be a leader, and leaders work to unite people with aspirational visions, not pull people apart by blaming other people for situations. And so I just, I think it should. If we had exceptional politicians, I think it would. I just don't think we do.
Ooh, if we had exception, that was good, Mark. Mark, that was if we had exceptional politicians, I think that we would. I think one of the things you said something that was so important, and I think that we've got to begin. When you were talking about us versus them, when we look at the founding fathers' documents, these documents that they created, all of those documents talk about we, and now it's an us and them
Us.
situation. And
Again, you're never going to agree with everybody, but you should. What I learned a long time ago in the business, as I'm transitioned from like technology and finance to business, is you have to try to find a common ground. And I think historically, exceptional politicians, while they disagreed on certain issues, tried to reach across an aisle and tried to find a common ground to make something exceptional happen. And you just don't see that anymore.
You know what I do see? I see that there's a lot of things, and I see a lot of things happening. And this is probably up your line of thought, Mark. A lot of things that are taking place where they try to make it us and them, and they try to use race as the dividing factor, even though we understand that race is kind of always an underlying elephant in the room, if we would. But
Yep.
really, if we were to look at real things, and we've had this conversation before, when we talk about us and them, that dynamic is not really black or white, but it's about the haves and the have not. It's about generational wealth and the wealth gap. And we sometimes, I think, get sucked into conversations by politicians that are not necessarily really appropriate based upon what the real issue is. It is about how do we create a more equitable wealth system in America, more so than, I guess there is an equitable wealth system, but how do we do something about the major wealth gap that exists?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to me. So when you look at this, and Chandler, I'm going to give you this question because you're a younger guy. Is there one party that you tend to look at as being a party that is more diverse than another?
Probably. I understand that the Republican Party does have a lot of representation, but it's always the Democratic Party that usually has more representation for different groups, but always they're not always, I guess a good representation. I suppose they're not always working as hard as they could be, like the Democrats in general, which is they're usually the guys I lean towards, but
What's interesting to me is that anyone who knows anything about history knows that the Republican Party has historically been the party that has, the party of my great grandparents. It was the Republican Party. They were the ones, the Emancipation Proclamation was a Republican president, and until Goldwater's in the 50s or so, what it was, and the whole race baiting thing, and then along with the Jim Crow laws in the 60s, the Republican Party has for a long time been the party, we say the party of Lincoln, but it was the party of Black America, and it's where we resided for a long time. And in the 60s, that wedge over race became a major issue. So my question, Mark, is because I know you're a voting American, and if you want to share your political
Mhm.
thoughts or process, it's completely up to you. I'm not going to
Yep.
ask you that. But do you think, either of you, do you think that the Republican Party stands to create, to keep or to build a consensus into communities of color? And do you think, based upon how the Democratic Party is their treatment of folks of color, do you think that they stand to keep those same people at that same type of base that they've currently been able to celebrate?
I mean, what's interesting in the last election, I'm not a huge Donald Trump fan. I've been pretty vocal about that, pretty public about it. But again, if I remember correctly, he had more black voters vote for him than any previous. And ultimately, I'm a Republican at heart. I'm a big believer in smaller government. I'm a big believer in there's no perfect system, so every system has its flaws. But I'm a big believer in capitalism. Now, capitalism run amok, it needs its checks and balances, is not a good thing, but capitalism run properly, I think, is what's created the wealth of this country. And if you look at the wealth and the innovation that's been created, it's been driven by largely capitalism. And, if individuals have unchecked power, bad things tend to happen. So it needs its checks and balances. And, at least in my lifetime, the Republican Party has stood for smaller governments, less taxes, pro-business, pro-capitalism, versus the Democratic Party, which was, historically more bigger government, social programs. What's interesting to me, you alluded to it, the South used to be strongly Democratic, the Jim Crow laws and blah, 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 blah. Now it's, it's almost flipped. It's, all these Republicans that, that are, what I would say, like big pro-Trump Republicans, and I'll leave it at that. And
I
so
think
it's an interesting flip-flop to me.
I think that's really interesting, Mark. And my question is, and as we talk about politics, it's interesting because, in layman's terms, the Republican Party has become, I think, in many circles in Black America, there was a change. I think a lot of people, especially those who are more affluent, people who were experiencing good times, and I'll say it from the community, hey, some Black people, when they have made a few dollars and they feel like they need to become Republican and say, hey, we have arrived, have moved over. Their philosophy changes with their income, and their tax bracket change. But I think what has become of the party of as of late is that many people, I feel, especially in my circle, that the Republican Party has almost become synonymous with skinheads and white.
That's the unfortunate thing. That's the fact.
What does the party do to change that dynamic?
That's my frustration with the Republican Party, to be perfectly honest. And I've told leaders in the Republican Party that at some point, I understand you want your party to win elections, but at some point you have to stand for something. And if what the party leaders are talking about is something you can't stomach personally, shouldn't you stand up and say something? You can't just, I'm going to support the Republican Party no matter what they say or do. And at some point you need to stand for something. And to me, I'm just really discouraged with where the Republican Party has gone the last number of years. And I wish it would change direction to be much more aspirational about what could be, rather than, like I got a personal note email, and I won't say who, from a Republican running for office. And
out of Mark, tell us who it is. No, I'm just
no,
joking.
I'm not going to do that. But the note started with, I worked for Donald Trump, basically.
Wow.
And if you knew anything about me, you don't want to start there. It then spent the rest of the email basically telling me that he's not Pelosi, he's not AOC, he's not a progressive liberal, he's not this, he's not that. Nothing about what he stands for. And then it finished with, like, I work for Trump. And it's just like, okay, what do you stand for? Other than, I guess, what you stand for is what Trump stood for.
They tell you what he's, I guess, in saying so, they tell you what they stand for. And I'm going to tell you this, and I would have to be very honest. I say this all the time. I am independent as a voter. meaning that I think independently. I don't let anyone frame or put, anything into my mind. But and I hate that neither party is really being what term you use, inspirational. No one is really presenting anything that from these major parties. And so where I am as a black man, I honestly, I kind of consider there's a lot that I loved about the Republican Party when it comes to their dynamic or their belief, their supposed belief in terms of what marriage is. I'm in line with that. When it comes to their thoughts about, abortion rights, I believe in. I'm pro life, but that means as a black man, pro life takes on a different look than it does for white America, because I think pro life for white America often means a baby that is born and they don't want an abortion to take place. But I often struggle with that same group of people on how can you be so concerned about a baby's life, but once the child is in the world, you no longer have that same pro-life mentality about the life that exists. And so that became a struggle. And then with, as of late, the fact that nobody's willing to stand up and speak out against this race baiting, this hatred, that this whole conversation that number 45 brought to the table. And to say nothing means that you become implicit. You agree with what's being said if nobody's willing to stand up. And that's one of the things that I like about your stance, Mark, is that you've been like, listen, I'm a Republican. What you're seeing out there is not what I equate with the Republican Party.
For the
But
first time in my life, I voted for a Democrat, not because I thought he would be a great president. I thought he'd be a horrible president, but because I thought 4 more years of this will tear the country apart.
Well, I voted for a Democrat because there was nobody else for me to vote for. That's, so different perspectives, but
Yeah,
and I was
2016, I voted for an independent because I couldn't vote for Hillary Clinton, and I was not going to waste my vote one more time and potentially have Donald Trump be president again. I just couldn't do
Mark,
it.
what do you think is the potential of a party that would emerge outside of these two main parties that would understand? Because I'm going to tell you, if I can find a party that speaks to the needs of the people, that believes in capital, because I believe in capitalism, but I also believe that capitalism has to have an aspect to it where it is concerned about the people that are at the bottom of capitalism. And I wouldn't call it socialism. I would call it nation awareness or something. I don't know what I would call it. But I don't believe in giving things away. I think that people appreciate things that they do in fact work for. However, I think that there is a piece of capitalism that is broken, and that it has gone, as you talked about, government run amok. And that's one of those places that we don't agree with, because capitalism has survived for so long on the work of, the lower percentage. And that's kind of how it works. If we were all fairly in the rat race, so to speak, I could then, easily agree. But I think there's a conversation that people who believe in capitalism have to have, whether they're ready for it or not. And that's really where, where is the positioning on how do we leverage that whole conversation, as we were talking before about the wealth gap. And it takes us to a scary place that makes many of us feel very uncomfortable when we have to be having those conversations. But I think one of the things that is very important is that if the Republican Party does not, if the Republican Party doesn't do something about the extreme right, they become the party that is of the skinheads and white supremacy. And if the Democratic Party doesn't do something about this extreme left, they become the party of whack jobs and nut jobs. And so I think that there is a space here, probably for the first time in American politics, for people who are conservative in their thoughts, in their ideas, who believe in less government, who believes in free market and all of these other things. And I'm just wondering, Mark, do you ever think that we'll see this other party that would exist?
It's hard for me to see that, to be honest. Again, what do I know? I mean, I was sitting in Berlin in 1989 with some friends in West Berlin who basically thought Germany would be reunified, but it would be 50 years from then. And literally 4 months later, Germany was reunified. So it's hard for me to envision it, but who knows? I mean, what I really would prefer is that, the more centrist, intellectual minded, and I shouldn't have probably said that because that sounds elitist, but
that was very elitist, buddy.
centrist Republican, forward-thinking Republicans would take control of the party again and kind of get it going in the right direction again. Is kind of, I think, is more likely than a third party sprouting up, and kind of a centrist party.
Well, something's got to happen pretty quick because it's going to be a party of yesteryear, especially with the browning of America. It becomes a big issue. I want us to turn our conversation. We got a few minutes here, and I want us to talk a little bit about faith. I brought up the conversation to you guys earlier about the idea of Christianity being the white man's religion. Do you guys understand what I'm saying, or where that comes from, or do I need to just, okay, really quickly. The idea is that Christianity, which was the pervasive religion that most people were experiencing during the time of slavery, slave owners would use some of the black pastors or ministers or people that they would elevate and say, hey, I want you to use this, teach this word. And they would take passages from the Bible that were like, you have to respect the slave owner and submit to the slave master, or to your, no man can have two masters, that kind of conversation, as a way to keep the slaves subdued. And so many people, and religion has been a key factor in the entire slave trade process. So many African Americans struggle with believing in a Christianity that has purported, when you look at all the pictures of Jesus, he's this white man with blue eyes, brown hair, that is not even consistent with the demographics of the period of time, nor the area of time, nor the area of the world that he comes from. And so they refer to it as a white man's religion. So when you hear those types of things, Mark, I know that you are a man of faith. It's one of the things we share and talk about. How do you begin to deal with that and answer those types of skeptics?
Well, I this is the first time I'm hearing this discussion. I mean, I grew up Catholic, so I was born Southern Baptist, but my mom divorced at an early age, and I won't go into all that, but married a Catholic, converted to Catholicism, so I was really raised Catholic. And the Catholicism I grew up in has been very not like that. I mean, it's like today, you frequently will hear homilies about people at the border, we need to help, we need to, Father Hesburgh, I went to the University of Notre Dame. Father Hesburgh was the president of Notre Dame forever. He walked arm in arm with Martin Luther King. So a lot of Catholics were heavily involved in, the civil rights movement. And so in my worldview, what I've grown up in and around, Catholicism, which is, the original Christian religion, at least that's what, we believe anyway. So it's not like that at all. Now, I know there's a history there. You've talked to me about, there's priests and, that traded slaves at Georgetown University.
At Georgetown, right.
Yeah. Different time and place, that doesn't make it right. But the Catholicism I grew up in wasn't like that at all. So I don't know what to think about it, to be honest. I mean, you're a Christian. Well, let's hear your perspective. You're a Black Christian. I'd love to get your perspective.
Okay, the first thing I would like to say, and this may stir some people up, I don't use the term Christian. I use the term believer.
Okay.
Now, if you were to look at our ministry, we would be considered a Christian church based upon our faith. Mm-hmm. Because I believe that a lot of atrocities have occurred because of faith and religion, and but none of that, well, not because of faith, because of religion. And so I'm a man of faith, and that's why I refer to you as a man of faith. Aside from my religion, I don't believe in religion. Religion is what man does for man. Relationship is what God does for man. And so I'm a person who believes in what is written according to Scripture. And so I think that there are a lot of Christians who are Christians because it's like the biggest, it's which country club do you belong to? Which social group do you belong to? But they don't actually believe in the things or the tenets of that particular faith. And so I can be a Christian, if you would, or a believer in Jesus Christ, because I believe in the tenets and what he stood for and how he lived. And when we look at that, it is irrespective of your race, your makeup. I believe in the believer should be a multitude of people just like heaven. And so that belief of mine was challenged in 2020, and I said this to you before, because as we've seen the Pope and Christianity, or especially Catholicism and other nations, stand up for these injustices, including Ukraine. Our nation was nearly at war in 2020, and there was no voice, no side, no anything from anybody. And so those things are disheartening. But hey, I believe that we are one people. I don't live my life based upon what other people do. I do it so that I live the best that I can be. But I do take notes. So that's where I am with that, Mark. That's where I am with that. But what governs or drives you as a man of faith? When you look at your family and your kids and your wife, I'm going to give you the last minute here. What is the thing that drives you most as a father?
Wow, that's a great question. I think there's just a natural instinct to protect and want the best for your children. It's like everybody. I mean, I think I won't say every, the vast majority of fathers, there's just like mothers, there's an innate desire to want the best and to be willing to sacrifice. And frankly, I ran in a lot of ways, every business or company I ran, to me, it was almost like an extended family. And that's how I looked at it. I feel like I have a personal responsibility to help my children be the best they possibly can be.
And so I think that's a powerful thing. And I think that if we would look at our faith and our beliefs in that capacity, and as you get older, your understanding, your core values, your core beliefs begin to take on a new meaning to you in life. And Mark, I'm sure you have kids that say, hey, they walk away from this whole thing called faith and belief, but as they continue to live through life, this thing called faith and this relationship with our Creator becomes something more important. And I often said, hey, if you're real, I want to know who you are and have this personal relationship. And I think that we'll all do that over time. It's crazy. This time goes so fast. I love you guys all out there. We'll pick this conversation up and we'll talk about it a little bit more next week as we continue United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. All right, Mark, I'm kind of interested, because we stumbled into an area that I'm interested in asking you a question. Being a man of faith and understanding this generation that we're dealing with, this younger generation, is so different than my generation, and certainly as it comes to activating or exercising their faith.
Yes. And I've got 7 kids, so I've got them from millennials to Gen whatever to Gen whatever. So I've got them across the last 3 gens.
So how have you managed to continue in your faith, to be sensitive to your children's needs and their beliefs in terms of what is important, not important? And I can almost imagine how someone like, I'm not sure I believe. I don't believe anymore.
Yeah, well, I've got, frankly, I don't know that. I've got 2 that claim they're atheists, and I'm assuming they are. Okay. And I've got another 5 who go everywhere from agnostic to, I don't know exactly what they believe. I'd say, again, I think, so the way we handled it was basically while they were living in our house, so through high school, they had to go to mass.
You in this house, you going to church. I didn't heard that one.
And as they got older and they got a license, it was like, okay, you don't have to go with us Sunday morning, but you're going to go. And, the last one would go to mass on Sunday night. And I knew he was there, but he'd sit out in the lobby, and he claims he's an atheist, which is fine. I believe that, like, I'm a little bit like you. There's a difference between religion and faith or whatever. Yeah. I like to call while I'm a practicing Catholic, I don't consider myself religious. I consider myself more spiritual in a sense.
Absolutely.
And I think that spiritual journey, faith journey, whatever you want to call it, is a super personal thing. And everyone has to go about it in their own way. And ultimately, my kids, I think, are all really good kids. and they're good people, and they're trying to just get through life. And I don't worry too much about it, frankly, other than to just be a good example. And now my wife, who's super Catholic, kind of much more what I'd call old school, rule book
Super
Catholics,
Catholics.
gets worried about it, more worried about it than I do at times. But I ultimately, it's the kind of the thing a little bit like my view on homosexuality has changed over the years. Ultimately, as I tell her, and she's uncomfortable with it a bit at times, or friends who are divorced, it's like, it's not my job to judge people. That's God's job.
Absolutely.
It's my job to be as helpful as I can to people to help them be the best they possibly can be. That's my job.
Absolutely.
And it's like kind of the same way with my kids. My job is not to judge them. It's to help them get through life and be the best they can possibly be.
It's interesting because I can definitely empathize and sympathize with folks who have walked away from the faith altogether, and not whether I would say that I wouldn't probably say that I was an atheist, because at some point I believed in God or whatever was up there. And at times I didn't really understand what that might look like or who he might be. Because religion was pushed on me so hard. And so, so when you say that it's very personal, the greatest thing that my family could have done for me, is to just leave me alone. They were all afraid of me because, I went to school and I was going to become a Muslim, and I'm walking around. Alaikum salam. I'm joining Muslim groups, coming home, and they used to call me. My family started calling me Malcolm Farrakhan because they said, "Dude, you are so radical." And some were walking around, man, it's because the man and in that process, I told my family, it is so funny. In that process, I was really searching for what I truly believed in. And what got me with Islam is that I saw something that I never saw in Christianity, which is really an indictment for, Black ministries and pastors, was that I'd never seen Black men who were so well put together, who were extreme. I've seen articulate Black men, but I've never seen Black men who address the issues of poverty in our community and the lack of enterprise in our community. And when I went in, the first person I saw was Louis Farrakhan speaking. He's an absolutely tremendous, great speaker. And he was arousing, and he understood what he had on that campus with a lot of kids who probably came from Christian homes who had never really been taught anything about real faith. But in him, that was the thing that stirred me up, that kind of like, hey, I want to do what this guy's doing. And that was the thing that caught my attention for Islam. And then when I began to study Islam, my Christian grandparents who were pastors always told us that Muslims were going to hell and they were the devil. And then when I started reading about Islam, I'm like, this is the most pure form of belief and religion, and then I started studying like it. So if Islam has got to be right, then this Christianity stuff has got to be wrong. And it was in that class, Study of the Hebrew Bible, with this Jewish rabbi who I found out was a Jew for Jesus later, that my faith and my real understanding of who it was. But it took me to understand the basics of Christianity and faith and dynamics and the culture of the time, to understand why there was a need for something other than Judaism to move to Christianity. And then to understand that as a Black man, I was represented in the Bible. It may not seem like a big thing, and it may seem like just kind of like a social issue as it relates to being able to see, to understand the true nature and the race, or whatever you would like to call it, of Jesus Christ. But it was important for me as a Black man that when I saw that, and understood biblical Blackness, and that Black people are all throughout the Bible, that, David's grandmother Bathsheba was from Moab, which meant dark skin. Being able to see myself in a faith and understand that I was a part of that faith was so important. Now, what color God became after I understood what he represented no longer made a difference. But understanding that I was not, from a curse of Cain or something of that nature, but I was actually represented, that Philip the eunuch took Christianity to Africa. It made such a big difference. And so I'm able to now say, because what I ended up doing was proving that I did believe in God, and that I believe that he was the way, and coming back to my faith in a quote unquote Christian religion. But that took my process. And so when I think about what you're saying with your kids, we often force our kids into things. And the reality of the situation is this is a step-by-step process that we have to evolve into. And he is a creator that deals with us each individually. And ultimately, isn't that what we want? That our kids believe in the things that they say that they believe in, and they're not just going along for the ride. So I think it was a really interesting transition.
Yeah.
So no, but I thank you, Mark, for this conversation, and those of you who kind of stayed involved. And I know that as this conversation airs, many people are going to be impacted, because I think we touched on some things that people deal with on a regular basis, especially as it relates to the politics. Because in the Black community, when you become a Republican, it's almost like you become Uncle Tom. Like
why do you think so many Black people voted for Donald Trump?
Because I think there's a growing consensus among Black men that have and that are suffering, and I shouldn't say this, but I gotta say it the way that I actually feel it. That's who I am. That are suffering from real identity crisis. They are Black men who recognize that they are not like the Black men who are on, from the hood. There's something a little bit different from them. And so they desire to find a place in which they assimilate with, or that they can connect with.
Right.
And so since they don't see themselves dealing with, I'm not the person from the hood, I've gone to an Ivy League school, so I got to be something other than what this person is. If this is what democracy or Democrats do, then Republican must be the party for me. And they become a part of that party. Tim Scott said something so interesting when and he's a Republican. For those of you who don't know, Tim Scott is a Republican out of South Carolina, and someone that I respect. And he was saying, hey, I don't understand what the problem is. America is, this was last year, America is not a racist country. And when I thought about that on firsthand, I was like, where the heck does this dude live? Like, what planet are you from? But given the experiences and the things that he has been through, I can see how he might see that. Because in many instances, as we've said before, Mark, the things that hold down in many instances, if you get to a certain, upper echelon in American life, it's no longer about Black or white. It's about economics.
Right.
And if you are affluent enough to live in certain area codes and be a part of certain places, you don't have that same experience that Black men who grow up in inner cities are experiencing. And that's the difference between the social economic groups. And one of the things that we now see the changing or the emerging change in race and race and what is it? Economics. And we've talked about that a couple of times.
Yep.
So I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think it's really interesting, but you got me scratching my beard over here thinking about those things. But I thank you guys for tuning in. I know you got a hard stop, Mark, in a little bit. You got some things to do. We want you to go out there and chase your Ghostbusters, get those ghouls and goblins, all those crazy things. Let me know how that goes. I'm interested.
If I see any ghosts, I'll text you.
Okay, and if anything jumps in you, you always got a brother back home that's gonna help you with an exorcism. Okay, all right, you take it easy. All of you guys are listening. God bless you all. Grace and peace.